For some reason, the 11th graders have my heart. I love teaching 11th grade. That's, I think, what I miss the most. Those 11th graders, I just feel like that's when you get really serious about school for the most part. You know, you're getting ready to apply for colleges. You have the regents coming up, the state testing. You also have your SATs. And it just was a great experience every year when I taught the 11th graders. I love the text that we read. I love the writing that we did.
We both know that teaching, I mean, obviously the first year is definitely the hardest, right? You are sink or swim trying to figure this out, and you got 30 kids in front of you that are like, well, what are we doing today? You know? And so, but as it goes on, you really it's really trial by fire is what I feel, because you have to be there in the moment. You have to be 100% present. You have to try things. And even though maybe the class before it went terribly, you're like, this is it. I mean, I can tweak it a little bit, but this is what my day is going to look like today, right? And so it's really important to have that community and the ability to speak with different people.
I really loved group work. Project-based learning is one of my tried and true and just something that I'm really passionate about. So I'm excited that I get to do that now in my current role. Project-based learning is something I did a lot of collaborative group work with students. I think showing them, just getting them used to working with people that they might not know or they might not like is really important from a young age, because you never know who you're going to have to work with when you're older.
Looking back, you see all the really nice times, or even when you're in it, you're like, but I love this lesson. Why? You know, maybe I'll give this a little bit more. Maybe I'll give this a little bit more. And it's tough. And at the end of the day, again, for anybody who's listening, who feels similar emotions but is still in the classroom, your number one priority is yourself.
I'm super happy. I feel like my work-life balance finally exists. I had no idea what that was before. So it's really nice. Like, they prioritize, my team is amazing. We prioritize our health. If I need to take a sick day, like yesterday, I had a cold this week, and the beginning of the week was super crazy. And yesterday I was like, finally, I don't have any meetings in the afternoon. I'm going to just log off for a couple hours. And the team was like, please do, Christina, like, get some rest. And teaching, like, you can never do that. Like, you're never off. Even if, like, you take a sick day, you have to create the lesson plans and then grade the work.
Idea that most teachers know so well, if not all, is this idea of playing catch up in your head the entire time, where, like we mentioned before, you're fully on in the classroom because you are, caretaking for many people, and you have these things that need to get done. And again, pointing back to all the extra work on top of just teaching is something that is can really bury somebody, and it feels like you're drowning at times.
One thing that stood out to me, because you said it a couple of times, was parents knowing what the other options are for their children. And I think even young people knowing what options are available to them is so important, because in the classroom, I think we may have seen things that I wish I could have told a parent about, or I wish a parent knew that they could opt out of something. So I think having the work that you do is really important. So thank you for providing that for families and for students.
Hi everybody, welcome back to the Traveling Teacher Podcast. Teachers who left the classroom but not education as a whole. I am your host, Peter Panopoulos, and today we have another very special guest. Christina Karahisarlidis-Drexler knew she wanted to be a teacher from the young age of 6 years old. Christina's first teaching job was a high school ELA teacher in the New York City Department of Education. This job lasted for 7 years, where Christina's joy in the classroom was quite visible to those around her. Over time, Christina realized teaching was taking over her personal life and made the very difficult decision to leave the classroom in the spring of 2023. Christina knew she couldn't leave education entirely, and her current role as program manager at an education nonprofit has been the perfect change. When she's not working, Christina enjoys spending time in Queens, New York with her husband, their dog Cholula, family and friends, trying new foods, crocheting, and reading. Christina, thank you so much for being a guest on the Traveling Teacher podcast. It really is a pleasure.
Thanks so much for having me, Peter. I'm super excited to be here.
And if no one could tell from our last names, we both are Greek and we both definitely enjoy trying new food. So it's something that's always nice to connect about with the Greek culture. And I'm sure there's a whole lot of Greeks out there in New York. Am I right?
Oh, 100%. There's so many, especially in Astoria. So that's where I am. I grew up coming here for church. It was only natural that I moved here as an adult. Lots of Greeks walking around. It's super great. And so many good restaurants.
That's
Highly
what we
recommend.
that's what we bring to the table for sure. That's one of the many things that we like to bring wherever we go. Christina, in the introduction, it mentions that you wanted to do this from 6 years old, but tell us a little bit about all of that. Like, how did this get started for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of easy to decide what I was going to do. So I grew up on Long Island. My parents are immigrants from Greece. My brother and I were students in ESL classes. And once I got to kindergarten and first grade, I immediately loved school. I loved my teachers, specifically my first grade teacher, Mrs. Albertina. I was lucky enough to have her again as a second grade teacher. So I knew right when I was in her classroom, whenever anyone asked me, what do you want to do when you grow up? I said, I want to be like Mrs. Albertina. I want to be a teacher. And then I started to really think about it even more as I got older. I would just kind of say it when I was super young. And then when I got older, I loved reading. So I knew I wanted to teach English. I wanted to, create the environment that Mrs. Albertina created for me and my classmates, and also then share my love of literature with students. I knew I couldn't teach elementary school because I don't have maybe that much capacity, but I knew high school for sure. I wanted to really dive into the text, dive into analysis. So I didn't change my mind at all, which is kind of crazy. I knew once I was applying to colleges, I wanted to apply in education programs. Kind of crazy. I didn't change course at all. Pretty wild.
That is pretty amazing, and it's been really cool to hear. Most teachers that I've had on have said that they just knew they wanted to be a teacher from a young age, right? Myself included, and I think it just points to, we need to kind of listen to that child's self at times, but it's also really cool that you really didn't stray away from that at all, because it's tough, especially in high school, as teaching those kids. There's so many options. There's so much influence from the people around you and all of that you're kind of being dragged in one direction and another, and eventually you just kind of have to make a decision for yourself, hopefully. And so it's really nice that you just knew. And it's also cool that it was the first and second grade, and I totally do agree about the elementary. I mean, I taught middle school, but I did elementary school substituting for literally 2.5 days, and it was just too many boogers and tears for me. And so I really give a lot of props to the elementary teachers, because it's a rowdy bunch for sure.
Definitely. I mean, I give you props for middle school. I did one semester of student teaching in a sixth grade class, and I said, I can never do this again. It was
it's so
so
funny.
hard.
Yeah, like I was actually on track to go be a physics teacher in high school,
Wow.
and I got an opportunity to do a long-term sub for the seventh grade, and it didn't even cross my mind before that. And when the day I got in there, I was like, these are my people, like these are my
Aw.
students. I absolutely love the energy, although at sometimes it can definitely be a lot. But yeah, it's so interesting. Just the way I think of traveling, I feel as though everybody has a specific way they like to travel, whether it's motorcycle, bus, planes, anything like that. And I think it's kind of the same exact thing when it comes to teaching, right? Is that everybody kind of knows what it is that they want to do.
Definitely.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your education background.
I was the first in my family. My brother and I were the first in our family to graduate high school. Education was huge for our parents. That's a large reason why they stayed here, and didn't go back to Greece. They wanted us to graduate high school. They wanted us to go to college. So I knew that I definitely wanted to do that when I was in high school. NYU was my dream school. I was like, I can definitely not afford it. I probably will not even get in, but let me go ahead and apply. I think I applied to like 12 or 13 schools. Surprisingly, I got into NYU, and I was like, I have to go. My parents and I looked at the financial aid package, which was pretty nice for a private school, but still definitely more than we could afford. So I took out loans. We all knew that I should do it. There wasn't like a doubt in my mind. I actually also got into BU. I thought about going there, so I would have been there. But once I got the NYU acceptance, I had to go. So I studied English education there. Of course, I got my minor in poetry because I also really love creative writing. I love poetry specifically. So it was kind of nice to do both. Going to school in the city was nice because then I was able to do my student teaching in the New York City DOE. So I did 2 semesters of that. My senior year of college, definitely a learning curve. Being first generation college student was really challenging, but it was great. It was a great experience. My brother was there to support me along the way. We were both doing it for the first time, so that was super nice. Once I graduated, I then started looking for a job. We'll get into the job later, teaching itself. And then when it was like during COVID when I went for my master's. I was supposed to walk at graduation the year of COVID, so 2020. I did it online at Southern New Hampshire University, loved that. I got my master's in creative writing poetry. So that was nice to kind of do it for me, but also in New York State, you have to have a master's degree to keep teaching. I had to do it, but it was nice to do something for myself as well. So lots of school.
Yeah, and it is necessary here in Boston as well to continue on. You do have to have a master's degree, and it's very interesting kind of what comes through in those classes, right? And I kind of like how you did it because it's you did your bachelor's in English and minor in poetry, and then you had some teaching experience before you went into your master's, right? So it's also, I did the same thing, and I found it to be very preferred by myself because you have all of these experiences from before that you can actually, apply to what it is that you're learning in the master's program. So good for you for doing it that way. And it's really cool to hear the immigrant story piece as well, right? I mean, why do people kind of move is to better lives and all of that. And it's so cool that everybody was so supportive of you, even at time when, NYU was kind of out of your reach, and yet you still went for it, right? And so that all sounds really amazing. You mentioned you taught high school. Was there any specific grades? Did you do all the grades?
I have done all the grades. So I started teaching in 2016. I graduated college in 2016 in May. I was hired in July, actually with one of my best friends from NYU. We didn't even know that we were both applying at the same school. Then I found out I got a job offer. She found out she got a job offer within like the next day at the same school. So that was really amazing. There I taught every grade except 12th grade. So I did 9th grade, I did 10th grade, I did a 9th grade independent reading class, I did 11th grade Regents prep, I did AP English language and composition, and I think that's all I taught at my first school. Oh boy, I was at my second school for 4 years, I was at my first school for 3. At my second school I taught AP Lang again, I taught 10th grade, I taught a 12th grade Regents prep class, 11th grade. For some reason, the 11th graders have my heart. I love teaching 11th grade. That's, I think, what I miss the most. Those 11th graders, I just feel like that's when you get really serious about school for the most part. You're getting ready to apply for colleges. You have the Regents coming up, the state testing. You also have your SATs. And it just was a really great experience every year when I taught the 11th graders. I love the text that we read. I love the writing that we did. Taught pretty much everything, English-wise.
Yeah, for sure. And that's super cool. I mean, how did it feel? How was it being in 2 different districts? Like, what were the differences? What did you like from one versus the other?
I think it's hard for New York City because there are different districts, but from what I noticed, it was more so the differences weren't necessarily in the districts, but the schools themselves, just because my first school was really big, like 2,500 students. So the first school was like its own building. It was really big. The second school was in a shared building, and that was about 600 students. So there were 4 schools in the building total. So just a completely different atmosphere, I think, in both. I think just like the biggest difference is, yeah, just the amount of staff for sure. Staff culture was different in both. The first school I was in, I didn't even know everyone I worked with because it was so big. We didn't even have like common time to sit together. The second school, I felt like I really got to know a lot more people and really kind of cultivate those relationships a little bit more, as opposed to my first school where I felt like I was mostly just with my English department because they were the ones that I saw the most. We also had small learning communities, they're called. I'm not sure if you're totally familiar with those. Maybe people have talked about them before, but it's essentially like this, because the school is so big, they need some kind of way to manage the students and the teachers and the classes themselves. So I was in this media SLC, so I was able to like chat with the teachers there and cultivate those relationships more than like a teacher in a different SLC that's all the way on the other side of the building. So that was definitely weird to jump from such a big school to a small school, but both definitely had their pros and cons.
Yeah, I mean, that idea of community is just so important, as everybody knows. And, especially within the schools, right? Because within specific departments or parts of the school, if they're really big, like the ones you're talking about, it's really helpful to collaborate, to find mentors of people who've maybe done it longer than you have and really learn from certain things that they have found. And, because we both know that teaching, I mean, obviously the first year is definitely the hardest, right? You are sink or swim trying to figure this out, and you got 30 kids in front of you that are like, well, what are we doing today? And so, but as it goes on, you really it's really trial by fire is what I feel, because you have to be there in the moment. You have to be 100% present. You have to try things. And even though maybe the class before it went terribly, you're like, this is it. I mean, I can tweak it a little bit, but this is what my day is going to look like today, right? And so it's really important to have that community and the ability to speak with different people, right? And so, yeah, I mean, which one do you think? I know there's pros and cons to both, but looking back, did you enjoy the bigger classrooms or the bigger schools or the smaller district at the last one?
Honestly, it's hard. I'm genuinely torn. I feel like they're both Title I schools that I was at. I felt like the student population at my first school seemed a little more, not like willing, but just a little more invested in what I was doing and what I was teaching. The second school, it seemed like a little, maybe higher stakes for them because it was smaller, so it was a little more competitive, as opposed to the bigger school where students were kind of, we know that there's 2,500 of us. They think that I'm not keeping tabs on them, but I am. But at the second school, like, they know I'm keeping tabs on them, So it's hard. I feel like I can't pick one or the other. I definitely loved both for a lot of reasons. I definitely struggled in both for a lot of reasons as well. But I think the relationships in both, like, have lasted a long time. So I'm definitely grateful for that. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
It's definitely a tough question, and there are certain pieces to both that everybody will enjoy, right? And for anybody who's looking to get into teaching here, that's listening, a couple of the things that I always like to say is that, first of all, always go with your gut, right? If you feel as though you want to try something different, a different district or something like that, or you're forced in that direction, it's never necessarily a bad thing, because you are learning a different perspective on the same education system, right? And yet on the flip side of that as well, if you get into a district and you're like, this is my district, I'm gonna stay here until I retire, it's such an amazing and rewarding thing as well, because you are a true pillar in the community of that educational system, right? And so there really is no right or wrong way of doing anything, but just understand that if you have a feeling, as we'll discuss later on with transitions and moving out of the classroom as well, follow it. If you feel something, just go with your gut. And, for me personally, I do feel as hard as you try is what you'll get out of it. And of course, there are times where things don't necessarily go as planned. But in the general scheme of things, I think that they typically tend to, right? So, but tell us a little bit about your classroom. What was the structure? What did it look like? Was it rows? Tell us about the looks of the classroom to start.
I loved my classrooms. I mean, the other difficult part of teaching in New York City is that you have multiple classrooms. There was only one year where I only had one classroom, and that was last year, actually, my last year of teaching. So every other year I had multiple classes, but I definitely wanted to create a beautiful space. So I spent a lot of my own money decorating, getting things ready. I always loved to write the date on the board. Even though it's high school, I know that the kids always appreciated things like that. Like I had lights in the room. I had stickers for them when they were doing work independently or in groups that I would always hand out. I wanted to create a space for students that when I was going to school, I loved going to school. I felt super safe there. I felt happy. I felt excited to be there, and I wanted to cultivate that space for my students. So I tried everything I could to do that. I'm extremely organized, so my classroom was always organized. I always loved to have something I learned from my first cooperating teacher actually was to have a space in the room for bins for students to drop off their work. So I created that right away. I was like in both of the schools, and every classroom I was in, I had these colorful bins, and I was like, drop off your work here. If I have work to hand back, it's going to go in the bin, in the folder. So students always knew where to go, because I think regardless of age group, our young people just need to have structure and stability. They might not have that at home. So I tried to create that as much as I could at school. I always started with a warm up. I usually like to do free writes because I love creative writing, something connected to whatever our lesson was going to be. Then usually going into a mini lesson. Then I really loved group work. Project-based learning is one of my tried and true, and just something that I'm really passionate about. So I'm excited that I get to do that now in my current role. Project-based learning is something I did a lot of collaborative group work with students. I think showing them, just getting them used to working with people that they might not know or they might not like is really important from a young age, because you never know who you're going to have to work with when you're older. I always wanted to create a space where students were excited to come in and reading. Like when I first started teaching, I would have the students write journals. This was very ambitious of me. But I would have them get a journal. If they couldn't get a journal, I would get it for them. And they would do free writes, or I would give them prompts, and then I would stay hours after school reading their journals, responding to them, and like those comments have just stayed with me like so many years after the fact, just reading their writing, and I've taken pictures of it. Like that was really meaningful, but that was also burning me out. Staying and reading 150 books was a lot, but definitely something that I loved and the kids loved too. But I feel like that's what you could have expected in my room.
That's amazing. It sounds super welcoming. The lights, even the structure that a lot of kids may feel as though they don't want is something that I feel as though comforts them, right? Putting the date on the board, doing the warm-ups, allowing time for free writing, allowing time for individual stuff, but also project-based learning with groups. I think it sounds like it was a very well-rounded classroom that I'm sure the kids loved. And I do agree, when we start out and we do things like the journals that you're talking about, and yeah, we as new teachers and teachers who just love education and working with kids, it can be a bit ambitious, but I'm sure you learn so much from it. And I think, for me personally, I feel as though teaching students, I learned so much from the students, just about life, about anything in general. And it sounds like you found similar things through the journals. So it's really amazing.
Yeah, 100%. I always told them that I'm their teacher, but I'm learning so much from them. Like their perspective on so many different issues is always beautiful to see. So totally agree with that.
Yeah, and it's just that mutual kind of human connection that's just so important that I feel as though the kids really gravitate towards. Because again, maybe they don't have that at home as much as they would like. Maybe whatever is going on in their lives, they know that when I go into Christina's classroom, I'm going to, have some kind of connection in terms of the English that we're working on or anything like that, right? And within the classroom, the conversations that come up, I'm sure people come up to you after, or they used to come up to you after class and just chat with you about their lives, right? And that piece, it's so interesting to see the changes generationally about what's going on in life, especially when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to social media and technology and all of these things taking over for good reasons and for, some things that can be a little bit negative as well. But it's just you really have a pulse on what's going on in the world by working with kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely agree with that. I mean, the conversations we would have, just even about like societal issues when we're reading a certain text, like they will say things that maybe I wasn't aware that they were aware of. So that was always eye opening. And then the conversations after class, during lunch, during, just an email like, hey, Miss K, I saw this and I thought of you. Like, this reminded me of what we talked about in class. Like, that stuff stays with you. And that I feel like that gives me a lot of hope for the future generations and what's to come.
Yeah, and I feel, the connection is the piece that the kids remember the most, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's true, it's clearly evident that there was a connection with you and your students because they would share these things with you. They would say, "Hey, this is something we were working on and I saw it out here." And that connection is the thing that is always going to be there for the kids, and it's something that I don't feel ever goes away because teachers for the most part are a significant part of kids' lives, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so when you make it meaningful, welcoming into the classroom, when you have things set in place with structure and all those things, it helps students kind of be a little more grounded in life and looking forward to the things that are to come in that classroom. And ultimately the classroom is sort of a microcosm for life. And I like what you said, right, is that you never know who you're going to be able to work with in the future, and so you have to kind of feel all the different styles out. That is a really awesome plus to group work in general, is that, and it's something that the kids really take in stride, I feel, because they may not be looking forward to working with a certain kid or something like that, and then they're in that group, they know they're there, and for the most part they make the best of it, right? Of course there's certain
Mm-hmm.
scenarios and whatnot, but those are also teaching moments. I mean, just being a teacher, as I always say, is 50% of it is the social emotional learning aspect, right? And so putting them into those groups and seeing how people respond and understanding what it is that you can kind of bring to light about how the group activity went is something that, again, it sticks with them forever. So thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think as educators, we're not just responsible for teaching them content. We're definitely responsible for helping shape them as individuals and as just as our future, because I think at home some of our kids definitely don't have certain structures in place. They might not have those adults that can help teach them certain things like societally. So I think it's definitely something that has, I think the relationship building part is what I miss the most, because
Yeah.
that was probably more valuable than the grades.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. It's such an important piece, and I really feel as though for teachers it's really the hardest thing to try to step away from is because of
Hmm.
those relationship building pieces. You are looking at the future. You are treating them as human beings, and again, it's something that is so important because I feel as though a lot of society may look at kids as just kids, but they are the future of society, and we have to treat them as one step higher than they may be at that moment because they are striving to get closer and closer to that bar, right? And so it is such an important thing for kids to be a part of in a positive way. And you minored in poetry. What kind of poetic things did you do in the class? What kind of assignments? Were there exciting pieces that you did year after year that you really just loved doing poetry wise?
Yeah, there was a lot. I mean, I always loved doing poetry with the kids because I feel like the reaction to we're going to read a poem or we're going to do a poetry unit was always like, oh, like I don't want to do that. So I was always excited for poetry time, and I tried to not make it just feel like antiquated, and I tried to bring in contemporary pieces, but also sprinkle it throughout our regular units. Yes, we're going to read The Great Gatsby, but then we're also going to read some poetry from Langston Hughes. It's not just going to be, I think supplementing text, especially in English, is super important. So I didn't want it to feel like, okay, we're only going to do poetry right now. But there were also times where I was like, we're only going to do poetry right now because we're in a poetry unit. because that is one of the parts on the New York State Regents that they have to prep for. So different story. But I always loved having them write their own poetry after we've read poems. So we would do like different models. I really liked the Christopher Marlowe. There was like a Christopher Marlowe unit, and then the nymphs reply to the shepherd. Like they did kind of, I had the kids then write like their own reply, which was fun. I feel like having them just see a poem, hopefully find a line that resonates with them. I think poetry is such a stigma to it, especially for young people. They maybe without even reading the poem, they'll automatically assume I'm not going to understand it because their association with poetry might be Shakespeare. And Shakespeare is extremely difficult, right? So I think creating something or giving them something more tangible is always really great. Like I always loved, one of my favorite poems to do every year was Theme for English Bee by Langston Hughes. And the kids, that the language in that is so it's easily accessible. Like there are references that they might not understand, but breaking down the references, I find ahead of time is helpful, or having them kind of like look for the references on their own after, do a little research, makes them, they still understand the poem. Like they understand what the poem was about. And then having them modeled their poems after that was really great. That was one of my favorite poetry activities. Then they would do, like theme for AP Lang or theme for ELA 10, whatever the class was at the time. But I loved it. I definitely loved teaching poetry.
Yeah, I mean, your passion is very clearly evident even in this recording right now. And do you feel as though that passion that you have for it really kind of helps students along with it and maybe spark that passion within specific students?
I think so. Yeah, I think the excitement that teachers have over the curriculum is going to trickle down on the kids. There were things where maybe I was forced to teach and I tried to get into it as much as I could and I wasn't having it, and then the kids weren't having it. But then when it was time to do something that I really loved, then the kids saw that, like they heard me say like cheesy things leading up to it, like that I think gets their attention more. And hopefully, I think because if a teacher is so passionate about something, then they know a lot about it and they can really help a student understand it more than if I'm being given a curriculum and then I'm giving it to the kids. There's no connection there. So I think it definitely makes a difference how passionate you are.
I totally agree. I mean, for me, I loved all parts of math except for statistics. It was my worst enemy. And I let the kids know the second the unit started that we are doing this together, because I cannot guarantee everything. And it was such a cool style of teaching and learning, because with statistics specifically, I would make mistakes all the time. And the kids would ask questions, and then we would have discussions about it. And it worked out for the best, even though it wasn't my specialty. But I do agree. I think the passion behind a specific topic is so important, because they feel it. Kids feel things so much more than adults, and it's so new to them that they are really open to emotions and every piece of everything that you're talking about. So I really agree. Were there any kind of real, I want to say, success stories, kids who were really struggling in the beginning with something, and then, just the progress that they made throughout the year was just so notable to you that it was like really memorable even to this day?
Yeah, I mean, there were so many. I think what's coming to mind mostly is, well, at my last school, I was lucky enough to have students 2 years in a row, not in a row. So I had them ninth grade students during COVID. So I only knew them through a computer. Obviously, that was really difficult and challenging for a lot of reasons, but I didn't know them and I only saw their writing. And there was one student in particular, she was really shy and like nervous, and she was convinced that she was a terrible writer, and anytime she would submit something, she would like leave me a little comment like, so sorry, this is terrible, like please let me know what you think, be honest. And just seeing her writing grow, then I had her again in AP Lang as a junior, and seeing her writing to the end of the year that year was so rewarding. And I could also not just see the improvement in her writing, she was really interested in like actually listened to feedback, and she took it openly and she sought it out. But to then see her confidence was so rewarding, because she knew that you could just see a shift in her. Like from the really shy, anxious, worried ninth grader, she was super self-conscious, not just about her writing, but just about so many other things. Like she would come to office hours and talk to me about social anxieties, and then seeing her in 11th grade just like have so many friends and be super social, and her writing was wonderful. Sometimes I'd be like, I wish I wrote that. Like, that's great. That student is going to stay with me for a long time.
It's so heartwarming hearing that, and it's just every student, every person in life, it's things just start to click when it's right for them, right? Some
Mm-hmm.
kids have it at 6th grade, some kids have it at 11th, and that's another whole aspect to teaching in general, is the ability to kind of see where each student is, academically and personally, and
Mm-hmm.
have the patience and understanding that no, we're going to do this together, we're going to work on this. And by 11th grade, as you mentioned in the story, like, look how far you've come, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just it's something that I miss the most in the classroom as well, is that connection. I'm sure you do. And again, for any teachers who are looking to leave the classroom, it's or thinking about it, it's not easy. It's not all roses. It's
Mm-mm.
really, it can be tough. Your emotions are put to the test because we are made to believe, or we are made to feel guilty for trying to take care of ourselves potentially when it comes to maybe leaving the classroom, because we take so much responsibility for these students, and we have ourselves on 24/7 while we're in the classroom. And it can be quite stressful, not necessarily because of the students, but just because you are in care of,
Mm-hmm.
around 30 students per period. You're talking 150 kids a day, and it can be stressful, but it can also be extremely rewarding, as you mentioned in the story. And you've definitely touched on this, but I do want to ask it in general. What was your favorite part of teaching in the classroom?
I always say my favorite part of teaching were the kids. I think they made me, even on the hardest days, I knew that I could laugh. I knew that I would smile. I knew that I would be happy seeing so many of the kids, and just seeing their reactions to what we were talking about, even if they like didn't want to be there. Just hearing from them meant the most. I think the relationships I built with those kids is what I miss the most, and
Yeah,
that was the best part.
I agree. It's a really tough thing to leave, and the cool thing with yourself, myself, and anybody who is a guest on this podcast is that we come to see that we are still being a part of students' lives, even
Mm-hmm.
if it is in a different capacity. And so again, for any teachers listening, just because you leave doesn't mean that you have to entirely get rid of that passion that you have for teaching students or being with students in some way.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many options out there, and this is really why this podcast came to light, was because what me leaving the classroom did for myself was unbelievable. And it sounds like all the guests on here, it has been very similar experiences, although tough, worth it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really what sparked this whole thing. So yeah, it's a great piece. But you mentioned your favorite part. What was your least favorite part of it, of teaching in the public school environment?
I think it's kind of what you were touching on before, like not necessarily the expectation piece, or the not necessarily the relationship, or like the relationship piece, like being responsible for the kids, like that I knew I signed up for that. I think it was the expectation that teachers are to put themselves aside and put their families aside and put like their own feelings aside. There were a lot of things that hurt me emotionally in the classroom that I would bring to administration in both schools. And I felt like my emotions weren't handled the way that they should have been. Like if I handled a student like that, I would have hated myself, and I would have immediately felt horrible for handling something like that. I think there was a lack of humanity for the educators for me.
Yeah, I totally hear what you're saying. It's such a tough, it can be such a tough environment, especially when it comes to the emotional pieces, but also all the extra work that needs to be
Mm,
done on top of the classroom, right?
yeah.
And all of these pieces really just kind of weigh down on teachers, and ultimately it really kind of constricts the passion that they may have because there's so much stress surrounding it, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
agree. Just like we like to keep students accountable, I think that it's very important to keep adults accountable as well. And when it comes to certain administrations, I'm sure that everybody is trying their best, and within systems it's very difficult to address specific things
Mm-hmm.
and see certain kinds of change with it. But I agree. And listen, education is being shaken up in a very big way right now. People are starting to see certain things that they like or don't like, starting to see different kinds of options like online schooling or
Mm-hmm.
homeschooling or any of these. Really, if there's a silver lining from 2020, it's that there, or one of them is that there are so many options that came to light because people really had to sink or swim and figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
And so these things that may have been hidden or kind of taboo in the past are now coming to light as viable options for families. And at the end of the day, every person has to make a choice for themselves, and that includes teachers. But also parents towards their students. They have to make a choice on what they feel is gonna work best for their family, right? And so the different options that are coming from this are definitely helpful and nice. But I do hear you. They do come at a cost of this adversity of what ultimately may be pushing teachers out of the classroom, right? So, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, talk to us about the leap, because I'm sure that those feelings that you just expressed are maybe a big piece of why you did end up leaving. But tell us about that journey of transitioning out of the classroom.
It was really hard to even make the decision. I can't even tell you how many hours I spent thinking about it, how many tears I cried over it, how much I really just like, I did flip flop like a lot. There were days where I was like, I know I'm leaving. Then there were days where I was like, oh, but like, look at this wonderful relationship that I just cultivated. And I think that's what kept me in it for as long as it did. I kept hearing, and I think teachers hear it a lot too. Like, I know that the like cliche is like, remember your why, right? And like, we're always told that as teachers, like, why did you get into this? Why are you doing this? And like, I would say that to myself. And then it came to the point where teaching was taking a toll on my mental health. It was taking a toll on my physical health. I was sick more than I'd ever been sick in the last couple of years of teaching. Like, I was just run down. I knew this wasn't good for me in the long run, but still I was like, oh, but I have so much fun. Like, I just loved this lesson that we did. I loved this unit that we did. So maybe it's not that bad. Like, we just had a party that was so much fun. Like, I can keep doing this. And then I had to like bring myself back and be like, no, I think that's the system. Convincing educators that they have to stay in something that is broken and maybe not be working for them anymore. It was not easy. I mean, I taught for 7 years. My last year was incredibly difficult. And it got to the point where I was just like, I need to focus on myself. I need to focus on my family. A few things that happened when I was in the classroom put a lot of things into perspective in my personal life and then outside of, and then in the classroom too. Life is really short. And I think that's what I kept telling myself. Like, you don't have to do this forever. I'm not even 30 yet. Like, I'll be 30 this year or this next month. And I'm like, can I keep doing this until I'm 65? I started teaching when I was 21 years old. Like, I don't think that's possible. Like, I can't imagine raising a family. I would be a terrible mom because I would just be teaching. I like you said before, it's not just, you're not just done in the classroom. You come home, you have to grade, you have to lesson plan, you have to create your slides. If there's like a visit from someone, you have to make sure that you get everything ready for that, right? Like the pressure from all those other things was just too much, and I couldn't do it anymore. So in the spring of last year, that's when I started to look and really get serious about like, okay, I have to get out. But it was really hard and a really daunting task.
It's tough. It's really tough. And to your point, you looking back, you see all the really nice times, or even when you're in it, you're like, but I love this lesson. Why? Maybe I'll
Mm-hmm.
give this a little bit more. Maybe I'll give this a little bit more. And it's tough. And at the end of the day, again, for anybody who's listening, who feels similar emotions but is still in the classroom, your number one priority is yourself, and you need to look out for yourself, because it's 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 okay to make transitions in life. I feel as though a lot of people kind of demonize that in a way where it's like, no,
Mm.
this is what I thought I was going to do my entire life, as I thought, as you thought maybe in the beginning as well. And it's okay to transition in life. Life is meant for changes. Life is meant for evolution. And when you listen to these things and you actually go along with it, you become a better version of yourself. And you realize at the end that you really kind of put yourself first. And that may sound selfish in a society that we live in today, but I do feel as though that's not put into perspective enough. Is
Mm-hmm.
that it's okay to be selfish about yourself and your needs and feelings and everything that arises in life. And who knows? I mean, maybe it's for anybody listening, maybe it's the piece that'll get you to what it is you're looking for in terms of that next step, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's so many options. Talk to us about what you have going on now. You're working for a nonprofit. Tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, just to also kind of go back to a point that you had made earlier,
Yeah.
about like it's okay to change, and it's okay like if you are thinking about changing districts. Like even my last year, like even this past June, I was like, maybe I just need to go to a different school. So like I had a couple interviews at other schools, and then it got to the point where even there I was like, no, because I kept telling myself, like you said, you think you're going to do this forever, right? And so I was like, maybe I just need a different school, and then I can keep doing this until I'm 65. And those interviews, I was just like, no, this doesn't feel right. Like, I think we have to listen to our guts at some point and be a little selfish, because it's not, I think to me, I was rationalizing it more like we're not being selfish necessarily for us. Like, I think for me, I'm then prioritizing my relationships. I'm prioritizing my family, my parents, my brother, my husband, my future family that I'm trying to create, my friends that I haven't seen in months and months because I'm, bogged down. So I think it's about priorities. But my current position, I'm so happy at. I've been here. I started September 12th. I'm absolutely loving it. My nonprofit is called Generation Citizen. We work with students, not just in New York City, but I'm on the Mid-Atlantic team. So we work with schools in Buffalo, Philly, and New York, Long Island, Westchester. And we promote civics education in middle and high schools with our curriculum. It is an action civics curriculum. It's project based. It is exactly what I love to do in my classroom. And I feel like, honestly, it's like addressing some of the issues that I had in the classroom, because so many times I kept hearing students say things like, well, I can't make a difference, or like my voice doesn't matter. And this curriculum really helps them engage with their local government officials, engage with their community members. They pick a focus issue, something that they want to change in their community. School could be school community, it could be, broader. And then they actually work to create that change. And it has been so beautiful. I think it's just as rewarding as teaching. Like, I get to work with educators, I get to go on school visits, I get to help create materials. Like, if students need a scaffold, I get to create that. And I think because I was that teacher, like, I know what the teachers need. And I think that that is such a beautiful thing that has been super meaningful. So I'm super happy. I feel like my work-life balance finally exists. I had no idea what that was before. So it's really nice. Like they prioritize, my team is amazing. We prioritize our health. If I need to take a sick day, like yesterday, I had a cold this week, and the beginning of the week was super crazy. And yesterday I was like, finally, I don't have any meetings in the afternoon. I'm going to just log off for a couple hours. And the team was like, please do, Christina, like get some rest. And teaching, like, like you can never do that. Like you're never off. Even if like you take a sick day, you have to create the lesson plans and then grade the work. So this has been such a breath of fresh air. Even on my hardest days, I always tell my husband, like, this week was really busy, but like, was it as busy as a single day of teaching? No, not at all.
That idea of sick days, and again, not being able to prioritize yourself and your needs when you're in the classroom because you have all these lesson plans and subs, and then you have this stress of, are the kids going to be respectful to the substitute? Is the substitute going to be good for them? You just have all of these thoughts swirling around in your head while you're sick on the couch, and it's not really indicative to healing in any way. So I hear you, and it's such a freeing thing to be able to say to your colleagues now, hey, I'm feeling kind of rough right now, I'm just going to go sleep it off, and for them to be like, yeah, go ahead, it's no problem, welcome to it. And it's so nice to hear about this nonprofit because again, it sounds like you have the project based piece that you always loved, and you're able to really implement it in every day in various capacities. And the school visits, I'm sure, like, how are those now that you're out of the classroom and you're going to see the schools? Like, how does it feel? What are your emotions when you do those?
I will say those hurt sometimes because I'm like, oh, I wish, like I see the teachers I'm working with have those relationships that are amazing, and I'm like, I wish I was still doing that. So I absolutely love going on school visits. It's made me miss it. I haven't had the moment yet where I'm like, oh, I need to go back into the classroom, but I'm like, that was really nice. Like seeing the kids do this amazing work, hearing them just share with a complete stranger, me walking in, like that's amazing. Like you're 14 and you just contacted your council member and they're going to come visit your classroom. Like that's so cool. I wish, I was able to provide this opportunity for my students. So that's definitely one of the best parts. Like I love going on school visits, seeing the different teachers and the classes that I'm working with.
And if you think about it in terms of being able to impact more people, it would be, yes, I agree. It would have been really nice to be able to give this to them when you were in the classroom. But at the same time, you're offering something to so many different people across so many different districts that the message that you are a part of starts to spread that much farther. And so I'm sure it's super rewarding in that sense. Because again, even if one student from one of the classes that you're visiting or doing something with gets a big piece out of it, they, like you mentioned, that 14-year-old talking to the government official, it's that spreads like wildfire, and you are being a significant part of that. So definitely thank you for doing that. Thank you for sharing that kind of stuff. It's really fun. And I do agree. It's, when you look in the classroom and you're like, oh man, it's tough to reminisce sometimes because you're like, I would love to just hop up there on that board real quick and just do my thing. Just give me one class. Let me try it out. And it's bittersweet at times. And so, yeah, but in general, and how has this transition helped your relationships with the people around you and more importantly, yourself?
I mean, I think it's helped tremendously. Like I don't feel sad. I don't feel miserable, like thinking about getting up tomorrow and having just, when I was teaching, I always had this huge to-do list in my head. And I'm sure you did too. And I'm sure everyone who is a teacher or has been a teacher had the same thing. And like one of my other friends also left teaching. She left teaching before me. And we talked about how like, it's so weird to kind of turn that off. Like I still have a running to-do list in my head, but it's not like tomorrow I have to get in at 7 a.m. to make copies for third and fourth period. And then I need to finish a lesson plan for sixth period. Like just the constant, like it was never off. And then you'd be laying in bed and then you'd still be thinking about it. So I think the relationship with myself has been wonderful. Like I'm able to, when I'm done with work, I turn my brain off. There are still times like, we have a lot of things happening next week. So I'm like, oh, I need to still follow up with that. But I write my little to-do list and I'm like, I'm going to get back to it tomorrow because right now everyone else is off and I'm not going to bother anyone because like we respect that boundary. But when I was teaching, I would get texts from, you know, other people at school at like 9 p.m. being like, oh, what about this for tomorrow? What about this? And I'm like, we have to have that boundary. So setting that boundary has been really healthy for me. I think for my relationships, it's been really great. Like I feel like I'm able to be present more. I always made it a point to check in on my friends, but now I feel like time to see them. I have also just like the mental capacity to talk with them instead of just a quick text like, hey, how are you? Now I feel like I can actually be present and not have to worry about the stack of essays that I have to grade and like get back to right away. So that has been priceless. I think just having that change has been a blessing.
That idea that most teachers know so well, if not all, is this idea of playing catch up in your head the entire time, where, like we mentioned before, you're fully on in the classroom because you are, caretaking for many people. And you have these things that need to get done. And again, pointing back to all the extra work on top of just teaching is something that is can really bury somebody, and it feels like you're drowning at times. And so when that kind of weight is lifted, and like you said, you're able to be more present, you're able to be more available, you're able to communicate more. Your cup is not so full with stress that you can't really communicate properly because these things are just always in your head of what you have to do and what needs to be done. And it's very, very refreshing to kind of step away from that. And again, it's not easy, but it sounds like it's really worth it. And again, for me personally, it 100% was. It has changed my life for the better in so many different ways. And again, for me, for the tutoring company, I'm able to help parents from the outside in and give them different understandings of options and availability and advocate for them in ways that I may not have been able to in the classroom. And it sounds like you're doing similar things in terms of impacting students with the curriculums that you are implementing and all of these things. So again, I really enjoy these conversations because again, it's something that any teachers who may feel stuck, that there are no other options for them and they have to live in the classroom and all of these things, they're simply no longer true. There are so many options out there, and I really look forward to having more guests on like you because it gives a message to teachers who may feel extremely overwhelmed but don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. This idea that, oh wow, no, that is something maybe I would like to pursue. And even for me, I have learned so much from the guests already, and this is still pretty new. And I've learned so much about what different options are out there, and really truly the passion, the mutual passion that you and I hold, and me and any other guest hold. It's really amazing to reminisce upon and express that passion in such a way. Is there anything that we did not touch upon about your journey that I didn't ask you that you would like to add?
I think just about like the process itself, like you just said, some teachers that are in the classroom right now might feel like they don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and I definitely felt that for a really long time. Like I applied to over 200 positions starting in May. I didn't get hired for this one until September. So I resigned in August without a job, but I knew that I wanted to potentially keep the door open to go back to the NYC DOE just in case. That's why I resigned when I did. But that was really scary. And so you have to, I think, having faith in yourself and then leaning on the people around you for support is really great. Like the support I got from my husband and my parents and my friends was so important. Like everyone supported me. Like my brother was like, you have to leave. Like you can't, there's no reason why you would stay. Like, it's not good for you anymore. And to make that decision, hoping that I'd land something else, I think is important. And I think educators need to trust themselves. You're not just tied to the classroom. Like, we have so many other skills, and I didn't necessarily know that until I started looking elsewhere. And it wasn't until I really started to think about what do I have to offer an organization outside of a school. And there are so many things. Like, we're extremely organized. We know how to handle multiple things at the same time. We know how to manage over 100 relationships at a time. Like, we can do so many things. And I think all the rejections were definitely starting to get to weigh on me. And I was convinced that I was going to be unemployed for, I don't know, years. But you never know. And you just have to, I think, I'm really glad that I did what I did and when I did, because if I didn't, who knows what I would have been, I couldn't imagine being in the classroom right now. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I would love to respond to all of the amazing things that you said right now, but I really think that it was so well said and well spoken that I just kind of want to leave it at that. So thank you so much. I mean, that was the whole thing was very informative. It's been so nice to hear your passion really come through, and reminiscing on the classroom with you, and seeing that you are still making a difference within the education system for students. Everything was amazing. Do you have anywhere that people can find you, or is there anything that you would like people to maybe look into, like your nonprofit or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, people can find me on LinkedIn. If you are looking to get out of a classroom and you want to build your network, look me up. I think I'm Christina Karahisarlidis-Drexler on there, so please look me up. I will gladly talk to you about anything. I'm in some Facebook groups for teachers leaving the classroom, Peter. That's how we found each other. So thank you
Yeah.
for reaching out. Definitely find me on Facebook or LinkedIn. I'm always there. But thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful. And I think just one final thing on the work that you do, I think one thing that stood out to me, because you said it a couple of times, was parents knowing what the other options are for their children. And I think even young people knowing what options are available to them is so important, because in the classroom, I think we may have seen things that I wish I could have told a parent about, or I wish a parent knew that they could opt out of something. So I think having the work that you do is really important. So thank you for providing that for families and for students.
Thank you so much for the kind words. I really appreciate it. This is just an unbelievable dream come true for me. All of these pieces, and it's really amazing to be able to offer these things and to hear stories like yours. So Christina, thank you again for joining us. I look forward to keeping touch in the future. And for all of you listening and watching, thank you so much for joining the Traveling Teacher Podcast, Teachers Who Left the Classroom But Not Education as a Whole. If you are a parent or even a teacher who is thinking about leaving the classroom, feel free to reach out with any questions. If you are a teacher who has left the classroom, definitely join us on this journey of telling your story, because it is something that will 100% impact at least one person who feels stuck, and that is a gift that it just keeps on giving. So thank you all again, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Peter.